Hey, Seminole State family, it's Nicole from the library, and we're back again on Wednesday with Research Rally. We've got a very, very special guest here to talk with us about literature criticism, all about it. And can we break it down into parts? Let's get to it. What is Research Rally?
Learn with librarians, get campus info, connect with your Seminole State family.
Every Wednesday at 4 p.m. at Seminole State Live on YouTube.
There we go. We're on.
Always surprised
Two
by
Jasons.
There it is.
Last week we had 3 Jasons. This week we have 2 Jasons. And this week we have 1 Claire. Welcome, Claire Miller.
Woo!
All right. So where's my little, I had a little, where'd you go? Where'd you go? We have an official banner to say, welcome to Claire. Yes, we are back. It's another Research Rally. It's Wednesday. We're talking about literature criticism, and we welcomed one of our fabulous librarians here at Seminole State College, Claire A. Miller, to come and talk with us about this because she has a background in the subject. So we're always coaching students, hey, talk to the experts, okay? And we like to follow our own advice most of the time, okay? If you see us slipping, you call us on it, please. All right. So, of course, we also have...
Oh, that's me. I'm Ross.
You.
Hi.
You're next, Ross. Hi, I'm Jason. I'm over here too. We're all here.
All right. So we got a little echoing. All right. So we have some FYE students, probably IDS students that are on the line watching today. So go ahead and comment. Let us know. What are we asking for? Your professor? Do you know your professor's name? We met some FYE students today that did not know their professor's name, which, okay, we're just getting started in college. We got to learn all these things. Okay. We'll take it easy on you. Claire, you're teaching, you're embedded in some of the IDS courses, aren't you?
I sure am. I just saw a couple of classes I'm embedded in pop up. So some folks may have met me, some of Professor Bouchorn's students, Barbara Coleman Foster's students. I'm in your course. Hi.
Here she is. All right. So Claire, before we get started and we actually dig in and get ultra niche about literature criticism, I'm going to highlight you. And if you could just tell us a little bit about your educational background, your professional background that lends to you being an expert in this subject.
Gosh, I don't know if I'd call myself an expert entirely, but I happened to get my undergraduate degree. That's my bachelor's degree in literature, English literature specifically. So I do have this big academic background, and then I went and got my master's degree in library science, and I focused a lot on readers advisory and children's literature, which actually is kind of what we're talking about today. And then I ended up working for a college. It's great.
All right. So, and yes, speaking of children's literature, we've got the Jason Robert here. That's awesome. Children's literature. Yes, we decided to pick a piece of literature that, we thought people would know something about. It was a good, that had some kind of context. Now, most of us are familiar with either the 1989 Little Mermaid, the Disney movie, or perhaps the more recent the Little Mermaid movie that came out this year, which Claire has seen. Ross, did you see that? Did you see the little? Okay, neither have I.
Action one too?
There's a live action one. Yeah, I actually have a lot of really detailed thoughts on the differences between the original story, the animated version from '89, and then the live action version. They're all very different versions, although they do have some overlap. But that kind of gets a little off field. But the hope is that you're at least vaguely familiar with the story, because you can't really talk about literary criticism without talking about a work of literature. And these days, most of us haven't all read exactly the same stories. So we went with something that most people have at least seen some version of.
Okay. So that's our starting point. So Claire, where do you want to, how should we start talking about literature criticism? Because a lot of our students watching, a lot of our viewers right now, if they're watching live, maybe they haven't had an assignment with literature criticism before.
Oh, that's a good point. Okay, so let me get my Yes. That looks
Hi,
like what I
Jason.
wanted to share.
Jason's back.
All right, I am
Okay.
attempting to share my screen. Did I do it right? No? No,
There
I
we go.
didn't.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. Yes, it's there. Awesome. I love it when a plan comes together. Great. So, literary criticism is fundamentally talking about how and why we tell stories. So, literature is any kind of fictional story, and it's really big. It could be drama, it could be poetry, it could be short stories, it could be novels, it might even be like films, can sometimes be considered part of literature, although they also fall under film studies. So, what literary criticism is it's not criticism the way we're often used to thinking about it, where I'm going to criticize this thing, I don't like it at all. No. Criticism means we're looking at it critically and we're trying to find new ways to look at these stories. Like, why does it matter? What's different about it? So, okay, now I've lost my presentation. It's around here somewhere. Haha, there it is.
And I have that on my list because I do have a little sign. You can't see it quite in my live stream, but it says question everything. And then it says why. And it was like, why do we care about lit crit? So you did start to get to that. So awesome. Because that's the question. What is it? Why does it matter?
It matters because how the work is written matters. It changes how we read it. When it was written might matter because it's going to matter, right, over time. The Little Mermaid was written over 100 years ago. So some of the things about our culture and the way people relate to each other have changed over time. It's going to matter who wrote it. Maybe things in Hans Christian Andersen's life influenced it. And then what happens a lot with literature is people retell the stories, right? We have the original fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen, and then we have a whole bunch of different interpretations. We have the movie versions, two different, very different movie versions, but we also have people who retell the story in different ways. And you'll see a lot of illustrations from different versions of The Little Mermaid in my little presentation today. And I think it's kind of a nice way to see how widely people interpret this, what they think it looks like. So, Nicole, I'm about to break your heart.
Are you going to break my heart?
Literary criticism doesn't really have a clear anatomy.
See, I was going for an analogy, okay? And I was uneducated about the topic, so I should have just abandoned my analogy from the start. And we have a video for that. Where is it? Come on. It's time to abandon my analogy. It just made sense. I'm like, anatomy, we can understand that part. So they work together.
Dog, there's something wrong with that dog. It's not running fast enough or it set the fire. I'm not sure. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled broadcast.
Yes, so this is a teaching moment. I didn't know enough. So yes, like I was trying to think of it in a certain frame, and Claire's the expert and she's telling me no. So we're breaking it down. How do we need to approach literature criticism?
So instead of looking for anatomy, now, you know, your approach is really great for articles like science articles. They're going to have an abstract, they're going to have an introduction, they're going to have a literature review, they're going to have a method section, they're going to have a results section. It's all broken down into pieces in a really clear way. But literature criticism doesn't really work that way. And I have a theory about this, actually. It's because we all really love literature, and so we end up writing in the ways we like to read. So we're telling the story, and we don't have a method section, and we don't have a conclusion section, and we don't have a review of previous research. We're just telling a new story.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like what we value in a field is what shows up in how we write about the field. That got surprisingly deep on me.
Deep as the sea where the Little Mermaid lives.
Exactly. Okay. So what we're doing is really trying to distinguish our mermaids from our manatees. No, wait, hang on. We're trying to figure out what the literary criticism is doing and if that fits with our research project. So in that abstract or that introduction or the first couple of paragraphs, you're going to find some very key points here. You're going to find what work is being analyzed. It's going to tell you that right up front, like what work of literature are we engaging with? And then they're usually going to tell you how they're approaching it. We're going to see a bunch of different examples later on in the presentation. And then they're going to tell you what kind of conclusions they got to, and they're going to lay it out, as I said, as a story. So when you're deciding on, can I use this type of literary criticism, you're trying to see if the story that they're telling about the story you're analyzing fits with what you want to do. Have I lost you? Was that clear?
Yeah, I think Jason,
so.
confused Jason just popped up there on the screen. That's like, okay, it's starting to gel, but okay, let me know. I graduated from interrupting you, so that's what I do. I just interrupt you all the day. Okay, I think it's starting. I feel like it's starting to gel for me, but this is new, so it's yeah.
Yeah, it's a different kind of scholarship. It's a different kind of writing. So now we're going to talk about the story, and I'm going to do the speed run version of the Hans Christian Andersen Little Mermaid. So this is a short story that was originally published as part of a collection of fairy tales for children. And Hans Christian Andersen is writing in 1880s-ish. And he lays out this story. And so I'm going to go through it really fast so we have time to talk about other things. But I also put snippets of the actual story next to the images so that you can see how he writes. Because how he writes is a way that kind of feels a little old-fashioned now. All right, so that's not the button I want. That's the button I want. All right, so the Littlest Mermaid is one of the youngest of the Sea King's daughters. They live in an undersea grotto. It's very lovely. There is a statue, and the Little Mermaid is obsessed with this statue. It's in the middle of her garden. And the statue is of a handsome young man. So the grandmother, who is a huge figure in the original story here, tells all of the mermaids, all of the Sea King's daughters, about the world above. And she'll tell them stories about how they live and how things are so different up there. And the Little Mermaid is obsessed. She is super into the human thing, and she latches on to the idea of the immortal soul, right? So she's interested because humans have this thing that mermaids do not have. They have a soul. And she's trying to figure out, like, is there a way for me to have a soul? I want one of these souls so I can go to heaven when I die. So apparently, according to the grandmother, the only way for a mermaid to get a soul is to have a human being, here's the quote, hold you so dear that you were to him more than a father or a mother, and if with all of his thoughts and affections he clung to you and made a priest, they have to get married, lay his right hand with yours in the promise to be faithful to you and forever, then his soul would flow into your body and you too would have a soul. Okay.
Wow.
So we could get married and have a soul as long as the prince is very true. So when the Little Mermaid finally comes of age, which is 15, under the sea, she goes up above to see the world of men for the first time, and she sees a ship. And there are fireworks going off, and she swims closer, and she sees that it is the prince's birthday. And she watches quietly from the sidelines and falls in love with the prince. And then a huge storm comes up, and the ship breaks apart into pieces, and the prince is drowning, and she grabs him because he's beautiful, and she remembers that he cannot breathe underwater. So she saves his life. She carries him wherever she can. So she gets him up on the shore, and then she hears people coming, and she runs away. And a woman, as part of a religious order, a young woman finds the prince, and the prince is convinced that she is the one who has saved his life. So the princess cannot stop thinking about the prince, and she keeps going up and looking at the human world and getting closer and closer, but she can't be part of that world. And finally, she's like, I have to go become a human. I have to, get the prince to love me because I want to have this immortal soul. So she goes to the sea witch, which this is my personal favorite illustration of the sea witch ever. Look at all of these amazing eels. And the deal is struck, basically. The sea witch is like, you're an idiot, but you really want this thing. Fine, I can turn you into a person with legs, but I'm going to take your tongue. No, like singing the voice into a seashell. Nope. The witch straight out cuts out her tongue to make the magic potion.
And then she
Under the sea.
It's a little darker. It's a little darker, right?
a tad bit darker. And she gets legs, but like when she walks, it's like she's stepping on knives. That didn't happen in 1989, Ariel.
That certainly did not. Yeah, so here we are. She can walk, but every step she takes is as if she steps on knives.
Just really
Every
quick in the chat, we have a big discussion going on in the chat with the prompt of, do mermaids have souls? There's a lot of yeses and a lot of nos. I like
Split.
the energy. Keep it going in the chat. Do they
Yeah.
or don't they? And there's a couple that said no, and then yes, maybe they do, and then maybe they don't. This is a thinker, Claire. It's a thinker.
It is a thinker. So in the Hans Christian Andersen version, it's 100% mermaids do not get souls. Once they die, they die. That's the end of them. They do not go to heaven. So the mermaid drinks the potion, sitting on the steps next to the sea of the prince's palace. The prince finds her and is like, what are you doing here? You're beautiful. And he kind of turns her into a pet. Remember, she can't speak. All she can do is look at him, and she dances. And he's kind of infatuated with her, but it really reads like in the story that he's kind of keeping her around as a curiosity or a pet. But the mermaid is falling head over heels for this prince. Now remember, the prince thinks someone else saved his life, and he is convinced that he is in love with that woman who saved his life, but he'll never get to see her or be in love with her because she's part of a religious order. Except his parents are like, you have to go get married to this princess. So he and the Little Mermaid, who he's convinced, oh no, I'll never marry anybody except that woman who saved my life. Guys, it's the same princess who saved his life. And so he tells the Little Mermaid, like, I'm marrying her. I'm so happy. You will rejoice in my happiness, for your devotion to me is great and sincere. Because, kind of missed this in the earlier recap, the morning after the prince's wedding, she's going to die. She will turn into sea foam and be no more. Like,
Little Mermaid.
The Little Mermaid. If the prince gets married to someone else, she's going to turn into sea foam and she will be dead.
And with no soul.
But
No
wait,
soul.
we don't know. There's a lot of people in the chat that say they have a soul. I don't know.
Well,
Here, look at this.
No, but that's the deal, right? The deal was that she gets the soul if he
Marries her.
Part
her.
of your
Follows
No
her in
tongue.
love.
But then there's a
Yeah.
catch coming, right? There's a tacked on part of the deal, right? In the ninth hour.
It's the original deal. It's the sea witch tells her straight up, like, if the prince does not marry you, you will turn into sea foam and die. That's it. You will not get to live out your 300 years of life, which are what mermaids get. They're very long lived, apparently. You will die the morning after your prince marries someone else. So that's part of the original deal, and the Little Mermaid agreed to it, knowing that going in. So the prince gets married, and that night her sisters show up, right? All of the Little Mermaid's sisters have cut their hair and given it to the sea witch, and the sea witch has given them a knife. And if the Little Mermaid stabs her prince and kills him, she will turn back into a mermaid and go back in the sea and live for the rest of her 300 years. But she won't do it. And this is where she should turn into sea foam, right? She doesn't kill the prince. That was the deal. The sun is coming up. And instead, Hans Christian Andersen pulls the greatest switcheroo ever. Suddenly, there are these things that we've seen and heard nothing about called the Daughters of the Air. And they are our spirits. And the Little Mermaid, for all of her love and kindness and not killing the prince, she has been turned into one of these Daughters of the Air. And Daughters of the Air can earn a place in heaven. And if you might be able to see at the bottom, if the children are well behaved, they will get to heaven faster.
Okay, so now since this is a children's story, it's making children feel like compelled to behave better because they're helping, basically like what would amount to fairies, like when Tinkerbell and Peter Pan is like clap harder,
Clap if you believe.
and
Yeah,
save
no,
the
this is the
fairy.
same kind of thing. It's like
Okay.
if you are well behaved, the daughters of the air will have the ability to earn their souls so that they can go to heaven when they die. So the Little Mermaid doesn't technically die. And Hans Christian Andersen was super proud of this ending because he basically said, hey, if the love of the human is the only way that she can gain a soul, she has to die. But I don't want her to die. I have found a third way. I've found a third way for this mermaid who does not have a soul to gain a soul. This idea of like earning salvation, which is really interesting and not entirely new. Whew. So that was the fastest run of the Little Mermaid ever.
Obviously,
girl.
Okay. Obviously, very different from 1989 Ariel, who, by the way, if you haven't noticed, in the chat, let us know if you already noticed that Claire is channeling 1989 Ariel with the swoop.
Oh, my hair swoop. Yeah, my hair's doing a thing today.
You just need a dingle hopper.
Wait a minute.
Who's got a hair?
Oh, I got a dingle hopper.
You got one.
You got a thingamajig or a whatchamawhat? I forget. So y'all in the chat, tell us all the other stuff that she had. What else do you have? Ross, do you have anything there? What do you have? You have a thingamabob or a...
Who's this and what's this?
Who's this and what's
About
it?
20.
Here's a pop quiz. Maybe
Okay.
Claire knows, maybe Claire doesn't know. Where in the world is the actual Little Mermaid statue? I have seen it and I know the answer.
I do know that answer. Do we want to give the chat a chance to
chat in the chat. Where in the world is there a Little Mermaid statue? And when you say Hans Christian Andersen, what country is he from? I don't know if it's in that country. It might be.
It is.
Okay, so he's from that country. Okay.
All right, we'll see if somebody knows it.
Part
So
of
Claire,
your world.
why does literary criticism exist?
So as I said earlier, literary criticism is really about like telling the stories around the story. So we know the plot of The Little Mermaid now. So what could we talk about with The Little Mermaid that would make things interesting? What could we talk about around it? So here are some ideas, right? What do we make about the mutilation of the Little Mermaid's body? She has her tongue cut out. It feels like she's walking on knives. So she can transform, but it's definitely not painless, and it definitely comes with some loss. So thinking about disability studies, what does the Little Mermaid have to tell us about how people view disabilities? Why does it matter that the 1989 version of The Little Mermaid, she's not looking for a soul? What's she into? Hey, Kayla, nice work.
Kayla, you winner. Dingle hopper.
Oh no! You got a
I
no.
Go wash it in the kitchen sink.
I don't know.
Kayla.
I don't know. We can do better than
it's in
that. Come to the
Denmark.
library. We'll get you a tote bag and a rally pin and
All the
we'll
good
hook up.
stuff.
Yeah, we're not going to give you that fork. No way.
Denmark. And that statue, if you Google the history of that statue,
It's really interesting stuff.
It's been through a lot as well, without spoiling it.
And nobody knows where the original is. The one that's on the Copenhagen waterfront is a replica of the original.
What? The tour guide lied to me.
The tour guide lied to you, Jason. Nobody knows where it is. It's hidden after the first replica was after the first one was defaced.
Oh, do
they
you
put a
think
replica up?
Do you think it's hidden under the sea?
Ah,
Ross. There's Ross. There we go.
Oh,
Oh. All right. So I think it's actually a kind of interesting change that instead of trying to find an immortal soul, right, Ariel, who actually gets a name now, she's not just called the Little Mermaid, is looking for this guy she's in love with. And so they keep some elements of the story and then they change certain other elements. And what does that mean? And
in
It's weird,
society, and when you're talking about, well, why would they change it? Why wouldn't they keep
right?
some of those more intense elements? Sure. Okay.
What are the ethics of the Little Mermaid, right? Why does it matter that she's making certain choices and not making other choices? Is it fair that the Sea Witch asks, basically says, hey, here's the deal. You got to give me your tongue, your voice, if you want to go up and try to be a human. How does a Little Mermaid view herself in the story as opposed to how others view her? Because a lot of the time, people are looking at her and saying, oh, your ideas are stupid, or, oh, you're so lovely, and kind of projecting their ideas onto her. So what does she feel about herself, and why does that matter? Whew, those are a lot of questions. Okay, so let's take a quick look at one of these articles that I found. This is a pretty interesting article, I thought. It's looking at how Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid is viewed in other cultures. And specifically, they're examining how it kind of plays out in Chinese culture. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Very cool, Toby.
And there's not many literature criticisms. There's not an overwhelming abundance of them in the databases, right, Claire?
It depends on the
compared
subject. If you wanted to research like Romeo and Juliet, there are probably 1,000 different criticisms. But for the Little Mermaid, I found 8 or so that were really about the Little Mermaid and not totally doing something different. So only 8 total. That's not a bad number. But if you're required to use, say, 5 sources for your paper, you're going to use most of those. Yeah. Let's look at some of these others. This one is really interesting. Remember I mentioned like disability studies? So this is looking at what disability studies has to say about the story of the Little Mermaid. I think it's really interesting stuff. And you can tell in the title, it's even telling us what story they're analyzing. So to go back to my little manatee slide, right? We need to figure out what story they're analyzing and then how they're doing it and whether or not we can use it.
And also when. Wait, I had how, when, who.
Yeah, when can definitely matter. So, for example, this article right here was published in 2023, just earlier this year. The first article we looked at was 1991. And then I have an older article here. No, this one's the 1991. So this one is specifically looking at what changes in the 1989 version. You'll notice I don't have any criticism of the newer live action Little Mermaid. It hasn't been published yet.
Yeah, not enough time.
Okay.
Right.
And there'll probably be new insights because, as you evidenced, even though these 3 Little Mermaids have differences, they come from they're from the original core story. And as time has gone on, that changes the when it was criticized or analyzed, changes the even how we can view it. Like, in 1991, would anyone have been thinking, was there a lot of literature about like disability studies or disability concerns? I mean, I don't even know when the ADA Act came in. I feel like it was like 1993 or something, when we started having ramps everywhere, where all public buildings have to have wheelchair ramps and things like that. So you see, the when matters as time goes on.
When does matter.
A
whole lot.
Just the context. Ross, I see you have a little screen share now. We're close on our time, but we can run a few over because we've got our subject matter expert here. But Ross, did you have anything you wanted to definitely share today?
Well, I mean, I had pulled up one of our literature databases where we would go to find literary criticism sources. I ran a search here through Gale Literature, which is my personal favorite one. This is from another story I was working on earlier, but you can see here when you search, it's going to default to literature criticism because that's what most people are looking for in a tool like this. So as you search, this is the kind of tool you'd be using because this is where the sources live. So that's all. I just wanted to kind of show this one off.
All right. And then you can see literature criticism. Usually they're separated biographies would be about
Mhm.
the authors of the story that you've been assigned or that you picked. Topic and work overviews kind of tell, like how Claire explained to us the retelling of the story. She explained the story. That would kind of be in that vein. It wouldn't be a deep analysis like the criticism is. All right, so Claire, I don't want to hijack your thing. So if we would need to wrap it up with what you've prepared, we can pop back over to you. Or
Oh, well, I wanted to show off a cool
Okay.
resource real quick. Yes, that's what I want. So we do have, so it's on the library homepages. You guys might see the subject
Ooh.
guide links.
disco, ooh, ooh, disco, ooh. Oh, is it fixed now? Okay.
I think it fixed itself, yeah.
Aw,
So
party.
if you go into literature, if you're looking for literary criticism, I'm going to recommend the literature guide. This is a super detailed guide that walks you through the whole process of like, how do I pick a source and what kind of sources do I need? And how do I find them? And it's broken down by type of source you need. So if you need literary criticism, you can go right in and we'll walk you through different databases and how to use them and even how to do sample searches in them. So this is very, very handy. Literature is, I'm going to say, one of the trickier things to research. It works a little bit differently than a lot of other kinds of research. You have to use different tools. Phrase searching is really important. If you're feeling stuck and you do need some literary criticism, this is a great time to ask a librarian.
That's right. We're going to plug the librarian services. Yes, you can come into the library. You can chat. We got our little tiny URL here 24/7. If you can't reach one of the Seminole State librarians, that doesn't matter. We have a worldwide consortium of librarians waiting to answer your questions at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., whenever you need to ask a question. And yes, especially since, like Claire's saying, this is a very involved, it's a different type of, it's harder to research literature, maybe, I guess more challenging. So that would definitely be the time to ask a librarian, for sure. And then also she talked about the LibGuides, which if you go to the library homepage and click on subject guides, you can find that list. And Jason, you put up the call for FYE credits.
Absolutely.
So you can text that number. Well, let me find that little, do we have that little banner again? Just want to make sure that anyone that's here that needs their FYE credit can get that. You can text us if we haven't already plugged you in, if you RSVP'd for the event. Okay. And thank you, Claire.
You are so welcome. It was a lot of fun to dive into The Little Mermaid again. I hadn't read it in a number of years, and it's a weird story. It's a really weird story.
And go ahead.
Oh, I have at some point, Nicole, you and I are going to have a talk about the new live action version and what it changes and what it keeps. Really interesting.
Now I've got to see it because I was obsessed with 1989 Ariel. And so then reading back on this original story, I didn't even realize that. So I definitely need to see that new one. All right. Well, wow, this has been awesome. All right. Warm fuzzies. Thank you, Claire. Thank you to our Seminole State family for joining us today. We will see you next time.
All right. Outro video. Where's the outro video? Where is it?
We're always waiting for it.
Wait, let's wait. I'll freeze frame. Pause. Where's the video? Where is it?
What is Research Rally?
Zinger! Zinger!
Cringe.
What is Research Rally?